Hey all, welcome back. Nice to be here with you today, Mike Fairborn with Think Scripting. Joined in the chat by my good friend Barb Armstrong, who helped me last go around. I think it might be three in a row for Barb, if I'm not mistaken, but really appreciate her being here to assist with our discussion today on Think Script. Folks, I do have some insight for you, a little bit of a lead into what you're going to be getting in terms of some new code that's going to be added over the weekend. In terms of labels, being able to shift those labels around on your screen, which we've not had the ability to do so thus far. Um, I'm going to share with you the code on how to do that. Although you won't be able to do it today, it's going to be uploaded on the weekend. But I just want to give you a head start. And so that's one key thing I want to talk about. And then amongst others, I wanted to look at some pivot points today, but not just pivot points on that short term, that 5-minute basis, but how pivot points could be interesting, particularly in a Think script around a weekly time frame where you're getting kind of a, just a wider range of data that's pointing to a possible, perhaps a bigger move one way or the other. We'll have to wait and see. Obviously, you don't know on pivot points, but it could be a very interesting code to dig into, and I plan to do that amongst a couple other items too. But with that, we'll dive into it. Okay, absolutely. Hello to you, David, Robert. Great to have you guys on board, as well as Rocky, who's coming to us from Pennsylvania, I believe. Awesome. Well, hey, without further ado, let's dive on into it so we can discuss these points. So first off, some disclosure items. The information here is for general information purposes only. And now Schwab does not recommend the use of technical analysis as a sole means of investment research. Paper money software application for educational purposes only. And a few additional points listed there. We do some backtesting in this class from time to time. Now, backtesting results presented are hypothetical, and there's no guarantee that the same strategy implemented today would produce similar results. Investing involves risk, including the loss of principal. Finally, past performance of any security strategy does not guarantee future results or success. Hello to you, Joe, for joining us in the chat. Nice to have you here, as well as all of you folks. Any questions, comments, rather than the chat. By the way, feel free to follow Barb and I on X. Barb's handle, Barb Armstrong CS, is mine is Mike, simply just Mike Fairborn CS. All right. Well, let's take a dive into it. Let's talk about some changes we're going to be getting with some coding that will be updated over the weekend. I got a little bit of a primer into that. So I want to go into some details on it because generally, when we're looking at some of the labels we've seen, and we've thrown out several of these labels in the past with a number of different Think scripts we've done. An example one that we've done that I think is still listed, this is just like, for example, the yield display. Well, Tesla doesn't have a yield. Why don't we get one that has a yield so that it would actually make sense? But you can see it over here in the left-hand corner. In fact, I'll just kind of go full screen here so we could see that. Boeing have a yield? Okay, that's 0 for 2. I know some of the financials do. Here's a tech company that does as well. Network Appliance does have a dividend yield. That dividend yield is right over here. There's some cool things you can do with this, but it's just kind of like a simple label, and there's really only one spot, and then from here it goes like this. But let's talk about what they're going to be able to do going forward here. A simple label, let's just do this for now. I'm going to take this off, and I'm going to make this as basic as I can in these classes, just with simple kind of code. But like, say, for example, I've got a simple label here. I've just created just this very, very, just really straightforward code that just says, yeah, this is a simple label. It's just in the upper left-hand corner of the screen. They are created in such a format. Add label is the key word there. Open parentheses, yes, comma, within quotes, okay, comma, color dot, the actual color, close the parentheses, and then semicolon. And that's what we've got. So that gives us our label in the upper left-hand corner. Very simple, very, very straightforward to do, right? To move that around, and what that's going to look like going forward is something a lot like this. So the new labels, and I've got some images to kind of show you here as well. It's not working because the coding is not uploaded, as I mentioned, but it will look like this. So I've got, actually, I did list the basic one down below so you can see that, the one we just looked at. but this is going to be the addition. So it's already stopping everything because there's a problem here. It doesn't recognize this. Now, all I'm simply doing is what I want it to state. For example, here, this is a simple label. You see that? It's just going to state the same thing. I've got my color, but after the color, so right over here, there's going to be a comma. There's going to be a location. Location dot top underscore, very important, underscore right. I'm going to show you a few of these. You can see there's all kinds of issues with this. It's not going to work, but I think Saturday it will work, is what it's supposed to be. Yeah, I mean, either Saturday or Sunday, the weekend. We'll see how that turns out. But it will look, I mean, it'll look like this. I'm just going to share. I'm going to share with you it's going to be kind of a portion of the chart. It's not a full chart, but you can just kind of see, like over on the right-hand side, like I just pointed out, you're going to be able to have this over here. Now, I think this is interesting. You got a top right and a bottom right. This can be helpful. Think about it this way. For doing labels, now that you know kind of the general structure of the coding behind it, if you're doing labels, I mean, what is it that you might want to see in the bottom right-hand corner? What is it that you might want to see down there in the bottom right-hand corner? Maybe something tied into volume. I don't know. It could be anything. You could still have that down there. You could have, the reason I do like the upper right-hand corner is because it's, you know, it's where prices act right over here. So it's easy to see. It's always kind of bugged me to sort of, initially, I'd always kind of felt kind of weird to have it sort of over here into this range, like right over here and starting. It's okay. I mean, and it's able to do, but there might be certain things we want to see over here. There has been some price data and other things that we've used to get prices over there. I should say to get, we've talked about some code that we've actually used that could be helpful in the upper right-hand corner. For example, even today, like talking about a pivot point trade, a pivot point breaking out above a particular range could be interesting. Sorry, just one second. All right, and so that you have that, but you know you're also going to have the upper left-hand corner and the bottom left-hand corner as well, just as a side note. Okay, so you'll have that over here to kind of take a look at. But this is just a screenshot that I've created for us to look at. Now, as I mentioned that to you, though, let me do one more thing while we're on it. I'm just going to quickly paste over here just some of that same general type code, so you can kind of see what I've been kind of setting up here. One second, folks, just put this in. There we go. Okay, cool. So we've got this here, and I'll plug it down just so you get a sense of, an idea of, well, having it in kind of all kind of ranges. You got the bottom left, bottom right, top right. So those would be the four areas, and it can line them up as well as you do it. So it could position them next to each other. So it is kind of interesting. It is one new change that's coming, and it is, in fact, I think it's the only change for ThinkScript specifically, but I thought I would highlight that for you. But be thinking about it. Be thinking about how you might be able to use that going forward, and we're certainly going to tap into it within our class as well. Okay. So welcome all of you joining us in chat here. Great. We're just showing that new script that's going to be uploaded, the new codes, they're going to be uploaded into ThinkScript over the weekend so that you'll be able to tap into that using that code. All right. So very similar, though, to the simple code as we've mentioned previously. All right. Now, I did have a couple of follow-up questions on averages for, say, for example, indicators. We had another follow-up with the RSI. I think maybe somebody saw it, but they didn't get it. We created that recently. Let me pull it up here. So RSI average, moving average. So moving average on the RSI. I'll pull that up right now so you can see it. And basically, this just does create that RSI. And I'll take the RSI, the regular RSI off, and this one, so you can just kind of see it right there. But that's just a moving average on the RSI, folks, itself. Okay. Which is interesting because a lot of times traders might look and say, well, are we breaking above the moving average of the RSI? And what does RSI help us understand? The momentum. MOM for short, right? It helps us to understand, is there momentum in a particular move? I happen to be on network appliance still, but take some of these levels here, and that was kind of the usefulness of it. Where was the crossover above the moving average on the RSI? It was right there. Now that's showing strength in momentum. In momentum in the sense of closing prices here too, which is really quite helpful. So you're looking at closing prices slowing down, closing prices speeding up, a very, very interesting and unique way, I have to say, on a percentage basis over the past 14 bars. By the way, that's just a 9 simple moving average, but that is the percent change in those closing prices up or down, and then you see changes. Those could be interesting, right? I'll go ahead and make sure that this is shared again. If you don't have it, I think the individual may potentially be in the class. So I'm going to go ahead and just share this right now. A quick look at that script so you can just get a general feel of it too. So this is the RSI moving average. I'll point out a couple of just key things that we're doing here. We've got to find a way to link in the RSI moving average, because they're, this individual had tried to do it on the on the chart, and it wouldn't work. And there's not the capacity to do it. There's only a few selections to kind of look at. So this could be helpful, of course, to get this same moving average on a different indicator. You just want to change the indicator. Okay, I can go ahead and just share that with you though, so you have it. And by the way, all those think scripts, anything scripts, not guaranteed for timeliness or accuracy, but it's just taking the data that's being fed into it, and hopefully that data should be right. It's coming to the platform. Yeah, I mean, frequently is. Okay, so there we go. Cool. By the way, I really appreciate just taking a look at the chat here, and appreciate Barb's feedback as well. But there is a comment about, publishing a PDF covering ThinkScript in detail, just on online help. Sure. Yeah, that could be thank you for pointing that out. And thank you, Barb, for making note of that. So I love to be able to, capture those topics, and I can take those to management and see what else could be done in that regard. Okay, so thank you for that. Okay, love that. Yeah, I love the topic requests coming in as well. In fact, we're just hitting one right now in terms of that RSI moving average. A quick note. So if you come over here and you go in to, let's say, for example, let's just pull it up like a standard RSI. So let's say we've got an RSI up, and then we come over here and we say something like the RSI is here. If I jump in to that RSI, you can see that I've got, a few things I can look at here what the RSI itself is measuring. Now, we're taking a look at, the RSI, or I should say a moving average on the RSI. We got a lot of moving averages in here. I don't have them listed just yet, but if I click on any of these simple moving averages that I've added in, let's just click on the 10-period moving average, and I go down and I say, what am I measuring this against? It's price generally, right? Price action. It could be price, and that would be like the price of network appliance. We could also put one, it's kind of nice, volume. We could put a moving average on volume. In fact, I'll do it right now. So let's click on volume. And, I click OK, it'll show it. But notice there's no RSI in here. So that does require that code, or at least the general structure of that code, so that you can change the RSI indicator for whatever other indicator you wanted to have on there. I think RSI that was the only one request that we did actually have for it. But notice I can click OK now. And now you've got a moving average, which is really cool on volume. Okay, and there are a number of think scripts that can be built around prices moving above volume, or volume accelerating. Kind of getting some of that code in there too. Okay, now let me just check one thing here, and great, there's some good stuff coming through here. Awesome. Yeah, by the way, I'm with you on that, Robert. The text formatting to the label. Yeah, it's kind of static, isn't it? It's not exactly like Python, but I mean, it's nice to have it. It's nice that there are some additions to this coding, but it's a little. I've had some challenges for sure building out certain things I've been looking to do. But anyways, that's one that we can do. We can do a lot of stuff on indicators, and then there's your moving average on volume. But to put it on an indicator, yeah, definitely consider using like that coding that I pointed out earlier right there. Okay. It can be used in different colors. All right. Okay. So I think we got that down. Let me take another quick peek just in the chat, see if there's any questions that might have come up. Yes, yes, it is. So, Thea, that is the moving average on the RSI exactly. Yes. I'm not sure if it was you that had requested that, but we did have a couple the week before and then some before that. And again, just to kind of highlight this, you can change on here. The way that I've got this structured, you can, well, let's just show it to you. Yeah, so you got to see it. But right here, if you click on it, it'll enable you to quickly come up here and just change these levels. I should have actually capitalized these, but you can do that too in the script itself. But there you go, 14 period RSI. I chose the 9 just like they did on the MACD. The MACD is oftentimes chosen. And why that can be effective again, for those of you just joining us, is you just take like a certain level. You know, prices, or I should say, prices have dipped, but the trend is up. So trend up here, right? Still basing on other indications. I'll just put an arrow. Trend up. Yeah, we went up higher. We're kind of consolidating, but there was a kind of a gap up. We cleared resistance. Now prices have consolidated, and the RSI is it's excellent for picking up on percentage changes over a 14 period, percentage changes on a closing basis. And it says, yeah, things are getting weaker, weaker, weaker. Oh, things are changing, and boom, right there, there is that shorter period, and that's a shorter period moving average for sure. You don't even really see it much there. But it did give an indication of a change. And look how well that followed that up over this range. I mean, the trend is still clearly up, but even just the trigger point right there could be something of interest to you. Okay, right there is what some traders would kind of consider. By the way, the same thing holds true on the downside. In fact, right here, look when we broke below that level on that range. I mean, it did come down. It was also followed too by lower lows and lower highs in the RSI, touching off that before it recovered again. But if you can find an indicator that you like, that you think maps momentum very well, then a moving average on there could be kind of the sort of the trigger to get things going, you know, when there's like strength of buying. So anyways, there you go. I'll have this too in the description section and the more section for anybody that's viewing our discussion in the archives, just so you know. All right, let's see. Other questions coming in. Let's see. Oh, how to change the buying power. Uh, in like the paper money account, you can change some of that. By the way, that's little side note. I can just mention that while I'm here. Let's see, buying power. You can change positions. I'll put it to you that way. I'm sorry. Here's the monitor tab. You can change positions. Like say, for example, if we were looking over here at a position, GLW, whatever, we can right click on it. We can change. This is the ability that you have. This is only in paper money. I don't know if you can change buying power any other way. You know, or any other additions. It's whatever you want to change. It's in here. You can reset all positions, adjust position. You can adjust cash, add cash, and some other things too. So that might be a different question, but hey, I thought I'd answer it while we're here before we go into our next topic. Let's see. Oh, kind of lost how to apply this tool. Did that make sense though? In terms of applying this tool, why this could be interesting when the RSI and the blue line is crossing above, momentum is exceeding the average of momentum. It's a sensitivity indicator on the momentum of the RSI. So let me know if that doesn't make sense. But this crossover, in fact, let's do this. I just want to make sure we're clear on this because, I mean, yeah, well, you want to know how to apply it, no doubt about it. We're using the moving average on the RSI. Let's go ahead and just change this. I'll make it a little bit lighter. This is going to be the main line, a little bit thicker. And then our moving average on the RSI, I'll have it at a 2. Maybe a little bit easier to see. Yeah, there we go. So I'm going to just take off that bottom RSI. And so now you can just see this RSI. And all we're suggesting is, we were saying, is that some traders could use this as a sensitivity guide for momentum. So not only is RSI sensitive, but now it's even gives you some insight that it's moving above its average range. It's moving above the black line. So it's exceeding the average change in prices over here, and you're getting that breakout right there. So it could be something similar like you might see on a stock chart. For example, let's move this over here. Let's go like, yeah, let's say the 20 period, that'd work fine. The 20 period moving average crossing above the 100-day moving average, something like this. We'll put this on the chart. So like over here at the very left-hand corner of your screen, the green line, the 20 period, started to exceed the 100, and notice it holds above that 100. It got weak here, but maybe we're on the verge of getting back up above that if Network Appliance, for example, jumps up higher. How's it look on Tesla? You'll probably see a couple entries. There you go. So there's your entry right there. You finally got the 20 above the 100, and as long as you don't, you don't get a 20 crossing below the 100, maybe you stick with that. For example, a longer term trend. That's all I was getting at. Okay, we're just using momentum down here. Oh, it's not showing. So make sure on that color on that RSI, you're going to go ahead and click into it, right? And then you can change the different boxes right there is what you want to select. And the color is right down here. And by the way, if you don't see any color in there, just click in that box because it's probably just white, and then highlight a color that you're after, okay? And then you can go up to RSI, select that, click on it, and you should be good to go. By the way, a whole host of different moving averages you can put on there too, if you wanted to. You could put a whole moving average on the RSI, okay? On the RSI in terms of the average you're using. So there you go. There's a few things there. All right. Well, I'll come back to the chat just a second, but hopefully that was helpful for you. Okay, next up. Now let's do this. Oh yeah, Riceberg. Pause it. Exactly. Okay, so let's do this. We talked about pivot points, and there's been some follow-up here and there about pivot points. Pivot points are interesting. Pivot points, and in fact, I've got this pointed out for everybody right here. I sent this through just on my X channel, or I'm sorry, my X handle, not channel, just a calculation of pivot points here and how those are calculated. They're using the prior day's close. Okay, you've got the high, low, and close divided by 3. And they're interesting normally for traders on a shorter term basis, but they can be used for longer term timeframes too, which I wanted to tap into today. Let me just go ahead and share this. I'll share my link here. So you've got it. I think many of you already got it already. And by the way, if you're following me in my classrooms here, let me know if you're on my X handle. I'd be more than happy to follow you back for sure. I always check to see what everybody's doing, interesting. But follow Barb and I on X. There's my handle right there. Just wanted to point out to you that yes, these are the pivot points and they're used on a shorter term basis. Now, having said all that, let's go ahead and I'm going to take off just a couple of these for now. Real easy to do. And one more of these. Let's see. We're going to clear up our screen. In fact, what I'm going to do is just start over. Good way to start over. Just go right back to your original box. Now you're good to go. Okay. So a couple of things on the pivot points. Now, pivot points, again, upper right-hand corner, they're used for like entry and exit, kind of like triggers. So they could be used in the context of the trend, price pattern, moving averages. They could be used in context with any sort of indicators or volume. All right. Where we find them is over here on the left-hand side. So I'm going to type in pivots, pivot points right there. I'll pull up the pivot points and I'm going to show you what those pivot points look like. It's going to look pretty chaotic though. There you go. There are your pivot points. Now the standard pivot point is to be used because it's based on the prior day. It gives you levels, but it's hard to see those levels if you're not looking at them on a shorter term chart. Here is, let's say, a 10-day, well, a 30-day, 30-minute chart. I'm going to really zoom in too to kind of show this to you. Okay, now I'm using a 30. Now, normally in some of the classes I've taught, like futures, taught yesterday, we use the 5-day, 5-minute chart. But these, again, are interesting levels. A lot of traders will use them. And in fact, you're going to see some interesting correlations as it comes around to these levels. Now, keep this in mind, that everything on this day right here, so this day, the prior day, is where the calculations are formed. And they're formed for the next day. So remember that high-low close that you saw divided by 3? Well, that's this level, the middle line. And then everything else is R1, R2, resistance 1, resistance 2, support 1, and support 2. And what traders will look for are prices breaking above. Here's a good example of it. By the way, quick note, real fast. Notice how there's a lot of correlation at that level. It is interesting. You'll find that even though the calculations were made the day before, these can be, and you'll find this at different times, interesting support and resistance levels. And you'll see that the more you track this stuff. Now, where was this trade placed? And this is for, this is on an index, for example. We can do this on individual stocks as well. But you can come over here and look at this point right there. See that? When you break above this level, the trade is from that R1 to R2. So it's a way to kind of trade the trend. When the trend is up, boom, they say that that's really kind of a strong point where prices could glide between these two levels according to pivot points. That's how they trade these. Okay. Now, the center pivot point, I'm going to back out and we're going to go to a 5-day, 5-minute, which is just kind of standard. Okay. Easier to see, right? Even easier to see those levels. But you could still trade off of this level, upside, or this level, downside, right? We're just going to be talking about upside today just to make it easy. But notice, here's an interesting point. You run right up to that R1 level, you pull back, and then boom, as soon as you close back up above that, very quick run up to that level. Now, obviously, we could put in volume profile and just see where the support resistance is over there. It's fascinating, easy to do. That's something of interest as well. But I just want to give you a sense. These are pivot points, and we can create. Imagine having to go through and try to find these pivot points happening during the day. How much data is that? That would take you forever. You'd have to go to these 5-minute charts, zoom in, kind of see what's going on with that. We could look at anything. How about Apple over here? Remember, these were calculated the prior day, but look how we ran right up to that level. It happened to be the high of the day, the R1 level. Now, if you break above that level, kind of close above this line, then traders will try to trade this to the upside. We're running out of time because these grayed out areas are after hours, okay? But what if we build a think script? And I wanted to give you an explanation of what's going on behind the scenes. We've talked about this a little bit before, but what if we gave you, what if we talked about a think script that helped us with this on a 5-day, 5-minute? Well, we did it a couple of months ago. So tying into a recent request, we've already done it, but I want to extend our discussion today into an area that I think could be even more interesting, which is a weekly pivot. So those pivot levels will stay there all week long based upon the prior week. Okay. Another interesting point. Look at that. Touch right near that level. Look at this. Right off of the support 1 level. You're not going to get these anywhere else, unless you have the pivot points up. Look how it dragged along that level, refused to break. And then the next day refused to break. And then finally it broke, tested, hit the high at this point. So kind of think in terms of trading activity, maybe entry or exit signals, perhaps. This is what traders would use these for oftentimes. That's what pivot points are used for. Okay. So let me show it to you real quick. So we did this in the form of a scan, and I'm going to go into the scan tab, and I'll show you how this works here. But where are you? There we go. Okay. So if I clear these out and I just go into our load scan query, we were down here under pivots, and there it is. Pivot point S1. So it's breaking S1 or R1. There are a couple of different things we can look at here. I'm going to show it to you right now though. Let's just double check what's going on here. Here's the code. Okay, yeah, confirm price is breaking above the S1 level. Okay, now what I wanted to do is really kind of look at an R1 level going higher, and we could adjust this. We could say it's breaking above the R1 as opposed to the S1. The R1 would be a higher point. I'm going to show this to you right now, but this is breaking above. In other words, we've tested the low and we're kind of bouncing off and maybe coming up. So here is, we're going to run this on, let's run it on the S&P 500. Okay, and so you get a sense of what it's doing. It's bouncing off that lower point for the possibility of a bounce higher. That would be this point right here. An example like this, that is the S1 level. We're coming down and we're bouncing off that level, and we're seeing if it could extend higher. We're also looking at, we could look at something where it breaks above the R1 to R2, where actually the trend is in place. Okay. So let's get back to it, and there you go. That's all we've got out of the S&P 500. See what I mean? What are we getting? Five? A 5 out of the S&P 500? That's a low percent, right? Very low. And by the way, there's low. Why don't we just talking about low? Let's look at lows. There it is. See how it did that? We're down and we're just kind of lifting off it. Sometimes these can be interesting kind of support levels for a bounce, particularly if this was kind of a flag pattern that you were seeing on a daily chart. You zoom into a 5-minute and boom, you see it. Maybe coming off that level. Okay. Now, if we were just looking at pivot points only, we could be looking at a trade coming above here. I think that's what I did on my next one. Hang on one second. Did I not? Just one second over here. I think this scan, we had a couple of these, and I'll repost these if you guys, want to look at these specifically. That was the S3 break, which was really, this is the one that a lot of traders will say that it's so far out of bounds. The S3, I didn't even have it on the chart, but a lot of times they'll say that normally there could be, if you get a bounce off that level, it might be a pretty sharp bounce. But whatever the case is, we just changed the description in here because you have kind of the basic code behind it. Okay. Breaking above, what we need here is, let's say, for example, the R1 breaking up higher. You can change that here. You can create it. Okay. Now, the next point that I wanted to get to is the weekly pivots. Now, I don't know a lot of people that talk about, I've heard it spoken about one other time on a weekly chart. Remember, with the weekly chart, you can get oftentimes bigger moves. So as we come over here and we look at the 5-minute, shoot, we're getting like small moves over here, right? Because it's based on the day. But if we put a weekly chart, it takes the entire prior week and says, okay, these are the big weekly levels, and there could just be bigger ranges in between there for trades to potentially occur. And that's why traders could use them. So that there's a lot of data there. This is all you need to do. Once you add in your pivot points that I showed earlier over here, remember, it's a trading kind of an indicator, right? For the signal, the trigger kind of thing is where traders can use these, or where they use them. You add in the pivot points, and then you go over into that pivot point right here. Okay, and we're going to do this. We're going to change this into a weekly time frame. Show only today. No, just flip it into a weekly. Now we're going to take a look at it. Okay. Notice now when I go into it, into the time frame here. Oh, you know what? This is really weird. Just one second. I think this is a little bit different on mine. I wonder why. Hang on. Let's do that again. So here's our pivot points. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to just try to add another one in. See if it's totally different. Oh, interesting. Okay. So we can see these levels on a weekly chart. We're actually viewing them based upon the prior bar. And as a matter of fact, you see this data right here for this bar. These are going to be adjusting over here. Because remember, this is the calculation bar. I'll just put calc again there. It's the prior day. In this case, it's the prior bar we're using. And what we're doing is we're shooting this over here, and we're seeing where some of these interesting points might be. For example, on lows going forward. Okay, and so a key point being that notice over here this price action. I'm going to choose a bar over here. Here's a little bit of a flag pattern. I'm going to zoom into the daily to show you here in a second, but I just want to highlight this first. That's your center pivot point. Within this bar, we did notice the bar is above this point right there. Everybody see that? We went above. I mean, here is the closing price right up top. That's the close of the week. That means that we exceeded the R1 level. Hard to see. A little bit hard to see on the eyes. You got to squint for that little triangle there. But we went above there. Notice this. We did it again. We did it again. Those are indications for a weekly bar. It ran higher. Let's flip it to a daily and see if it'll actually do what I was hoping it would do. I'm going to zoom in now a lot. Okay. I don't know why this is happening. On my prior setup, it might be this demo account that I'm in right now. But what it's going to do, what it should be showing is that these bars should not be wavering from one day to the next. And I just don't know why they are. I don't know why. I'm going to try to do this on I've got another paper money account pulled up. Let's do this. On the paper money account, I'm going to go right back into that Lowe's. And we're going to go ahead and show you, I don't know, maybe it's the demo. But it should not show that on your end. It should just give you one set of bars across there for the entire week. So in other words, we come over here, this week, it should just be straight bars over here, which is a really interesting kind of line in the sand. And then what we can do is build a think script around that, which was going to be our part 2 here. But let's pull this up right now so I can show this to you. There we go. Okay, so I pulled it up. There it is. Now, let's try to add it in paper and see if this works. So pivot points. No, it's looking really similar. I don't know if it'll work. Huh. No, it's doing the exact same thing. Okay. So it's still not calculating it on the week. These are still doing it on bars, but it's shooting it out for the week. So this is just totally, I'll work on this, but my point is this. We could still create, I'm going to pull this down for now. We can still create a script based on this too. In fact, there can be a basic script we can use. If we come back over into the script that had built previously, in fact, it's going to be over here, and where this is working fine in terms of a 5-minute chart. But if I go into this, okay, we can still use this, changing different points, whatever we're after. We're going to have to flip this over into a weekly right here. And let me just check one last thing here on this. Yeah, we want to do this on a weekly chart, but the pivots, as long as it's basing it on the weekly pivots, we should be good. Should be fine. Okay, so I'm going to scan this for now, and let's just see what we get. Oh, gosh, hang on. That's on the NYSE. That was my default. That's a big list of stocks. That's like 2,900 almost stocks, so didn't mean to do that. Let's try this. No, we're still waiting for results. Okay, I might have just, okay, there we go. Well, you don't get a lot out of 2,900, right? So we can look at some of these. Boy, these are really, actually, you know what? Let's just try this and see what we've got. I don't think, yeah, okay. It's all fouled up, I think, on my demo account. Sorry, it should work fine. If you wanted to look at pivot points, though, on a weekly basis, I think a lot of people aren't aware that you can do it on a weekly basis. We can create the script in a similar way, as I just pointed out today in that script. This is not going to work, I don't think. Look back now. Okay. No matching symbols. I did get some matching symbols previously when I did run it outside of the demo account, but for some reason it's not working on the pivots. It actually should give us some more what it will show on the live, just so, or I should say on just a standard account. You click over here on the pivots, just so you know, it's going to ask you down here some additional points, and you're going to want to say yes for the person's pivots. Okay, and then that will keep it as a weekly pivot point. Well, I could work on that for sure and see if I can get a way or a workaround on this. But so far, I don't know if this requires a reboot or what. But we can certainly dive into more details on that, folks. At least we talked about the pivot points, right? The importance of what they do, perhaps using those if they make sense to you, and really as key turning points. I'm going to flip this back to a regular daily here. Let's just do that real quick. Key potential turning points on a move. We don't know if they're going to be key. Nothing's 100%, but this is just another addition that you can have within your trading here as well. So that lines up, and that looks a lot like the other one. I have no idea what the weekly was doing. It's shooting it all the data all over here. So let's just do this and take a look at a couple of things. All right, folks. Well, yep. Nearing the end of our discussion here. I'm sorry about that, but at least we talked about it and showing you that you can do it just outside of the demo account. But yeah, consider those weekly pivots because they can represent. Let me explain to you what the weekly would be doing real quick. I'm just going to draw the lines on here again real fast. So here was our week for this week on lows right there, 5 days, right? Well, it takes the prior 5-day calculation. That was the calculation. It takes the full week and it sends it over here and it puts those lines in here. So these lines would be the same throughout the entire week. So if you would have a point here, you'd have, let's say, a point above, a point below, and then you'd have a couple like the R2 and the R1 out here all week long. And these can be interesting because they're really tying in more data, weekly data, for possible price breaks or bounces that could be useful on a daily chart. But you're using the weekly pivots. So anyways, it's pretty flexible when it does work. All right. And on top of that, again, we talked about some changes that are coming over the weekend in terms of the simple kind of just labels. They're going to be popping up here. And we talked about how those new labels would look. Once again, just real quick, those labels will show. You can now put them in the upper right-hand corner, bottom right, lower left, and upper left as well. We talked about this, and then we also went into moving averages on different indicators to potentially increase the sensitivity. So I shared one of those. Again, if you're seeing this in the archives, that will be posted under description in the more section there. Folks, be sure and subscribe. Bottom right-hand corner of the screen. Great stuff. Barb, she teaches a number of excellent classes, trading a smaller account, among the others that you can take a look at. That's a Friday and a Monday class. It's so popular. And yeah, some of the classes I teach, the other coaches as well. Hit that like button if in fact you did like today's presentation, and give us a follow on X. All right, everybody. Well, I hope you have a great weekend. And I was just going to highlight and state that those are the points we discussed today. So till next time, see y'all.